Hello students, today we will discuss an essay on an educational reform by Hilary Belloc. Hilary Belloc was born in Paris in France and received his education at the Oratory School Birmingham and at Oxford. He became a naturalized citizen of England in 1903. He was a member of parliament from 1906 to 1910. He became interested in English literature and wrote history, poetry, novels, essays, biography, travel books, and children books. Of the children books, The Path to Rome is the most important. He was a versatile writer and his notable work include history, literature of travel, and literature for children. He also composed poems and a novel. Many of his essays were originally written for newspapers and periodicals. Majority of the essayist, Belloc is a master of the art of the essay writing. His style is delightful and amusing. He has a deep love for tradition. He exposes the follies of modern society with a sharp eye. Basically, Belloc is a scholar of history and religion. We can notice his mature scholarship, love and tolerance for life. He doesn't condemn anything with bitterness. Instead, he hints at the follies and hypocrisies of his age in a humorous way. The chief quality of Belloc's essay is humor. He makes fun of men and society. He writes with an ironical tone. Since we are determined, as I am not, but as all my colleagues seem to me, that a new world has arisen, since therefore all institutions may be remodeled at will, I trust there will appear in the education of wealthy children a reform overdue these many years. This reform is an addition of a certain subject to the curriculum of schools. We have all at one time or another deplored its absence. We all in one crisis or another of our lives recognize its necessity. If it be true that we have today an opportunity for new things, do let us inaugurate this novelty at least, which would be of such vast advantage to the generation now sprouting. And the new subject is Freud. Freud is the sole basis of the only form of success recognized among us. By Freud alone are those vast fortunes suddenly acquired, which only are the condition of greatness in modern man. Freud is the master subject, ignorance or inability in which looms a man to toil in obscurity, yet Freud is never taught at school. Men who had the paths for a most brilliant career fail on leaving the academics because they are outwitted by gutter snipes who have no letters but can cheat. Well, what trace is there of the great truth in the curriculum of our school? It is entirely neglected. I admit that promptity, which is a necessary element in all success, is indirectly taught. I admit still more freely and fully that the spirit of falsehood is taught as a sort of general subject, but I maintain that swindling as a particular subject is not taught at all, and even the most elementary forms of it, with which every boy ought to be acquainted in his early teens, come upon him with a shock when he is already a young married man, launched in life and, as the phrase goes, battling with the world. This, I say, is a shameful neglect. Here is an instance. The most elementary form of swindling, that which is, as it were, the gambit of every operation, and that which is the sum total of all the simpler questions of commerce, consists in giving a verbal assurance, which it is intended to repudiate later by document or action. You promise a man something which you don't intend to perform, or you give a false description which reality will later expose, or in some other way you use the psychology of affirmation to your advantage. Well, what could be simpler than to have a class, even if it were but half an hour a week, where all boys over a certain age could be trained by example, both to be open their guard against the false affirmation of others, and what is more important, to make false but plausible affirmation themselves with all the boldness which breeds success, to make affirmations particular, affirmation emphatic, affirmation probable, affirmation flattering. Even the negative side of this very necessary piece of training is omitted, and boys are not taught, at least in any school with which I have acquaintance, the importance of economy in falsehood. The immature mind will, of course, tend to falsehood as a natural human instinct, but the force of kindly nature is here wasted because it lacks direction. Young men go out into the world lying freely about the grandeur of their acquaintance, their personal prowess, and the rest, all matters conducting in no way to the accumulation of wealth, which is the end of the man. Now, what could be simpler than in such a class as I suggest? I admit that half an hour a week is rather short commons, but everything must have a beginning. What could be simpler than to give some direction, at least to his pseudological factor in the mind, and train it to the right end? Examples should be set before youth. Let the master recite some braggart story of strength or skill, such as is common among the young of the rich. Then let him show what a waste of energy it is, how an equal amount of pseudological force expended in useful channel. A false description or a flattery might have won £100. It is just as easy. The good preceptor would tell his young charges to brag about a horse that you want to sell as about, say, your horsemanship for which there is no market. It is just as easy to lie about the value of something you have for sale as it is to lie about your lineage. But in the first case, your trouser the dips, while in the second there is no stiffet, is wasted effort. Remember, therefore, my dear boys, to check yourselves when you are about to tell an uneconomical falsehood. Count 10 before you speak, and consider whether there be not ready to your hand some subject in which you can fully satisfy this natural instinct of lying, at the same time prepare some advantage for your pocket. It may be objected to me that if this very necessary reform were introduced and the elements of modern commerce were taught in our schools, the results would cancel out. For since all our youth would be forearmed, there would still be waged in the great world outside the conflict of the better sharper against the worse, with victory as now to the master thief. But such an objection applies to all forms of learning. My desire is to raise the general level of our gentry in this department, especially not to leave the man in middle ages with the bitter memory of lost opportunities. Opportunity lost through no personal fault, but through the neglect of those who had a scarce trust and who did not fulfill it. At least the man of 50 be able to say to himself, I had every advantage, my masters at school, and no one more than my dear old headmaster, Dr. Buggins, repeatedly warned me against the peril of honesty and were at pains to teach me how to overreach the innocent. If I have proved clumsy and am now living as a publisher's head, the fault is all with me. As things now are, many a man who has sunk to be proofreader or even an author is in his heart bitterly reproaching those who launched him upon the world quite ignorant of affairs. I conceive that the educationist who is ever eager to improve his changing science will here suggest particular subjects in this new department. He will see an expanding horizon of opportunity. My words have roused enthusiasm in him. He will ask me, of instance, who I have not included special classes in blackmail, monopoly, bullying, bribery, perjury, and so forth. Yes, certainly, all this should have their place, especially for older boys, but they may well be considered later. Perhaps such subject would best be left to special institutions, such as those which were so successful in the last generation under the name of Kramers, blackmail in particular, very like the art of outflanking in military science, requires a judgment of the world to which the mind can hardly attain till it's mature. Napoleon said, beware when you attempt to outflank that you not be outflanked yourself. A sound saying, for one in process of aging round the opponent extends his own communication and leaves an opportunity for that opponent to age round him. So it is with blackmail. Too often the blackmailer, just in the act of seizing the prize, a post in the ministry of what not, feels a sharp bite and discovers to his horror that the tables are turned. In a word, the teaching of this art of blackmail is the teaching of very difficult and skillful, complex action which must not be attempted rashly, and that is why I have some hesitation in recommending it for the ordinary curriculum of school. Nevertheless, the very rudiments of it, or at any rate some idea of what it is, might profitably be given even to the younger boys, and for this purpose, I would suggest a visit to some neighboring aquarium where the slow antics of the crab in his tank so graphically mimic our public life. The attention of the lads could be directed by their master to the alternate furtive movements of two crabs. There will be observance how the first pursues the second sideways across the tank and makes a clutch with his claw, how the second eludes this and in his turn chases his opponent off. This grotesque maneuver, my dear boys, the pastor will declaim, may remain in your minds as an example of what later you will be called upon to do it. You are called to serve your country in Parliament. The youngsters will soon forget all about it as in the fashion of boys with their lessons, but something I think will remain in the mind, though half obscured by time, and when they come to the vast affairs of which Westminster is the theatre, the object lesson of the true crabs will not be without service to them. Bribery, I take it, should not be taught, except in the point of degree, for it comes naturally enough to all men, both to give and to take bribes, and all that you need fix in the young mind is the double importance of avoiding avarice upon the one side and lavishness upon the other. For the taking of a bribe, no art of training whatsoever is required, but in the giving of the bribes, it is of some importance not to give too much, and of absolutely vital importance not to offer too little. It is upon this last point that many a noble career has made shipwreck. I have in mind one poor fellow whose father had left him a few millions. He was perpetually gutting down with all manner of hesitation, some just insufficient to purchase the object of his desires. In the long run, he had disbursed what should easily have commanded a high administrative position in the cabinet, a viceroyalty or a first-class embassy, yet he had nothing to show for it all but one private secretaryship, two chairmanship of committee, and a baronetcy, and this last only because he was childless. This essay on an education reform is written in an ironical tone. The writer tells us in a humorous way that corruption has entered in our social life. People like earning money by cheating, swindling, telling lies, and by taking bribes. Men achieve success in life through fraud, deception, and bribery. But our education system is idealistic, so these means of success find no place in our curriculum. Our students are taught to despise fraud and deception. They find in this practical life that those who have no education at all are more successful than educated ones. So the author suggests that periods for teaching fraud should be fixed at school. He humorously says that students should be taught to swindle, break a promise, and tell a lie for monetary gain. Blackmail, bribery, and perjury are difficult things to be understood by young students. They should be taught to older students when their minds are mature. In this essay, Bullock says that as the world has entered into a new era in which men can make money by fraud, and success of person depends on earning money. The man who has money is taken as great. Therefore, the writer suggests that fraud should be taught in school. This is a pity that such an important subject is not taught in school. That is why people who fit for the highest post fail to achieve their end, because they were outwitted by those who are quite uneducated, but they knew how to cheat. The writer says that half an hour per week should be given to the teaching of this subject. The writer also suggests that telling of lies and bribery are natural human qualities. This means that human beings was born with these qualities. Therefore, they should not be taught in school. They should be taught to tell lies only when they can get money. Otherwise, they should be economical in falsehood. The author means to say that in our society, falsehood is a very common trait. As for bribery, the writer says that people should not be greedy. They must not take or offer too much or too little. Next, by giving an example of the two crabs in a tank, he makes fun of the men in public life or members of parliament. The teacher should teach blackmailing by showing the fight between the crabs. When the students see the crabs fighting, they will understand how blackmail works. This knowledge will be useful to them when they will become members of parliament. In this way, the writer shows how people try to kill each other or try to save themselves from the attacks of others. The writer says that men tell lies, make false promises, blackmail each other, and give false evidences only to make money and become great. They succeed in life while others are doomed to hard work and to die unknown. Thus, we see that the writer has succeeded well in making fun of the public life of modern times through irony and satire. So, in this essay, Belloc makes fun of the education system of present day. In the next class, we will discuss about the stories in your course. The first story will be A Cup of Tea. Thank you very much.